You know what they say about assumptions, right? I'm the queen of making assumptions, and it never works out in my favor. What assumptions are you telling yourself where you need to flip the script? Where do you need to take a different perspective on the story in your head? Join today's episode as our guest, Tami Shaw, talks about her A-B method to the stories in her head and how she gets a more positive outlook to the stories that she tells herself. Welcome to Midlife Catalyst, a place where ordinary people share extraordinary stories. I'm Amanda Yance, and my purpose in bringing this podcast to you is to not only share my story, but share the stories of those that have influenced me. Today's guest has been a great colleague, confidant, and encourager along the way of this journey, and I'm glad to bring her here. Tami Shaw is a learning and talent development expert with nearly 2 decades focused on training, communications, organizational systems, design. She's had what she calls a series of dream jobs, from teaching 8th grade math in Arizona to innovating as the professional development specialist in Oklahoma's 3rd largest public school district. Through her current role as a dynamic speaker and trainer, Tami uses radically simple ideas to evoke empathy, provoke strategic thinking, and develop extraordinary communicators. Tami is a working genius certified facilitator with a bachelor's in English education and a master's in talent development. A light-up conversation with Tami just bring up strategic organizational design, training design, word choice, empathy, or Trader Joe's, some of my favorite topics. I'm looking forward to bringing this episode of Midlife Catalyst to you. Thank you for joining. I'm so glad to have you here on the podcast.
It's an honor to be invited.
Talk about whatever you want, but we have to stay focused, which I know you'll keep me on this, because we could talk for 2 hours. That's honestly why I wanted you on as a guest, not just because of your wealth of knowledge and information, but that you always just provide such clarity and insight into what I want to say. So I would say you are definitely on my board of directors. Do you know from, I think, Brené Brown in Dare to Lead, that was one of her exercises. I'm pretty sure that's where I got it, which of course Brené Brown is on my board of directors. But as I say in the show, it's ordinary people living extraordinary lives. And Brené Brown isn't really ordinary anymore in any regard. So while she's on there and I hear her voice in my head often, there are like real people that sit there, and you are one of them. Because I feel like regardless of how much time passes or whatever conversation, you're someone I can say, hey, I'm thinking about this, and you can give honest, true feedback.
And I have to remember that people, this is a podcast, people aren't watching my face necessarily. So when I'm like cheering and like honored by that statement that I'm on your board of directors, they can't see that. So
well, I do a visual too.
Okay,
I do,
great. Okay.
Yes, on YouTube and Substack. You get audio and visual. So my friends love that because I apparently make faces, and that is their favorite part of the podcast. It's fine for me because they'll actually watch the whole thing all the way through just so they don't miss a facial expression. So, I mean, hey.
I love your like ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I think that's so true about leaders. We learn a lot from the people who write the books and are on stage, and there's a really important place for them in our lives and our world. But so many great leaders can't go on social media and say, today was really hard, I had to fire somebody, let me tell you how it went. Like they can't talk about, or today we had a really contentious team meeting and I'm proud of the way I handled it. Like that's just not what they're going to do while they're in the deep work of leadership. So you don't always hear the stories unless you're experiencing it on their team. So I just love that you highlight that in all these different realms of the people you have on.
Thank you. Yeah.
You were one of those leaders. I mean, I worked with you when you were overseeing a massive department, and you wouldn't ever brag on the amazing things that you did, but you moved mountains and strategically reorganized things and hired and coached up and coached out, and you set culture. I mean, you did extraordinary work that if people weren't on your team may not know that about you.
Well, that's very kind. And I did not pay you to say those things. I think the last time we talked, I was telling you I had just gotten The Gap in the Game book by Dan Sullivan. It actually kind of speaks to what you're talking about, which is more of my personal healing journey on the happiness trail. But part of why I did not acknowledge the progress, the gains. I just kept seeing the gaps and how to close those, which as a leader, that's
Too.
what you're hired to do, right?
Yeah.
You've got to stay ahead of that trend rather than rest on your rear because we know what happens there. It's really something I'm trying to grow and embrace in this new realm of work, not, oh, I've got to hit a book deadline. I've got to do this. It's no, I actually wrote for 5 hours this week. I got 10,000 words done. Stopping and acknowledging how far I've come, not how much further I still have to go.
That's a huge part of goal setting. The discipline of effectively reaching your goals is you have to celebrate the milestones, and that's a continuous thing. I think it's hard because especially if you're driven and you're excited about the goal, you're really excited about the end product, whatever it is. And so to say, only one step up the mountain, but I'm really proud of that one step, and to keep celebrating that, you have to build that discipline. Good for you.
Obviously, there's still that mindset of I want more, I want to do more, I want to reach more, but having little small victory parties. You are a huge part of that, but you're also one of the reasons I love not just working with you, but still collaborating with you is because you are a true collaborator. Talk a little bit maybe about that mindset and approach because I look at it from my work with you, but now you're a trainer, you're a facilitator, you're impacting a lot of different people. How do you take that approach into your training, your
Oh,
business?
great question. Some of it is your core belief about other people that they have value to bring, and that you're not the smartest person in the room, right? That curiosity stance has been really helpful for me. I've always loved asking questions. That's just kind of how I operate. Even growing up, I remember that my mom would tell us, like, we're about to pull up to our cousin's house. What are 3 questions you can ask them? That was just part of life. But the word curiosity has grown into the mix over the last few years, and staying curious means you are all of a sudden leaning in because you have new ideas. You have done something in your path that's different than mine. So collaborating just comes from curiosity and a belief that other people might be different than you. You don't have to agree, but there's value there. And then, there's personalities all across for all of us, our relationships, where there are certain people that are kindred spirits, right? We just click and we can lean in and talk a little bit faster, and the trust is quick. And so collaborating in those spaces is even more fun. But let's see, in training, just recently I'm doing a 4-part series with 90-minute lunch and learns for managers and leaders in an industry in my area. I won't share their organization. I don't know that I have that right to do so, but um at first I was really nervous, like, I know a lot about leadership, but what do I have to tell them? And like, who is this person coming into whatever? And it was a beautiful moment, like a week before the first training, where I thought, I don't have to go in to teach them everything. So I opened the workshop with, I don't have the answers. Like, I know you're excited about conflict and how I have a magic wand for all the conflict, and nobody does. So we're just making space to have really rich discussions. And I mentioned, like, I was very prepared for that training. I knew what questions I wanted to ask. I knew how I wanted to facilitate the space so that they all got airtime and were digging in. It wasn't just like I didn't plan anything, but I didn't come knowing I have all the answers. I came wanting to create the space for them to build that, and then me layering in insights where maybe there were gaps. So I'm trying to take that approach even more, being wildly knowledgeable, doing all my research, making sure I'm reading and can pull the stories, but then going in really open to what does a great leader look like for you? Or talk to me about the last time you were struggling with an interpersonal conflict at work. Let's work through that together. Who wants to be vulnerable? Like, making the space for that has started to be what collaboration looks like for me within a training.
Love that. I love that because I got some pushback at one point, but it helps you see the level of readiness that your audience is. When you open with, I don't have the magic wand, nor is there a magic wand. This was a lot on behavior. And of course, when you say that to educators, they either acknowledge and are like, okay, well, at least they're not trying to feed me a line of bull because there is it, or you get them that just shut down because people want a quick fix. And it's like, there really isn't a quick fix to kids when you're talking, everyone's unique. But there's also with leaders, every leader that comes to the table brings different experiences and different things. Being able to open people up to have the conversations and the level of thanking is so.
Still having this space for educators with behavior problems. That's a good one. They're drowning, right? They're overwhelmed. They have more work to do than our hours in the day and have a very complex, difficult, heavy problem. So to just say, like, we're just going to make space to talk about it, but I don't have any answer. That is very frustrating. Like, you do have to come with, here's 3 strategies, and I hear you saying this. What if we try this and we check back? Like, being prepared with some kind of solution if they don't come up with it. So if they don't just feel heard and dismissed, they feel heard and hopeful. That to me that's the nuance of great training, is our ability to all that wisdom and be in the mess of real life experiences and talking about it.
Heard and hopeful. I love that. The ability to see people and make them feel seen and valued is so important. And it's so important in all aspects of life, I feel like right now, in all areas. And that's something you're exceptional with. That's, again, why you're on my board of directors, because there are times I want to just close people off and be like, nope, done, write them off. And you're always coming with positivity, and you really help me see come from their lens of perspective. That's one of my favorite things. So you want to share that little tip?
Thank you. My one of my like prayers in my life that I'm constantly praying is just, God, help me see people the way that you see them. And some of that comes from my vision disability and different things that have happened in my journey. But like, we all do stupid stuff and we're all annoying and we're all, like, there's just, we're all frustrated to one another because we're people. And so wanting to shut ourselves off and close off to that is just such a tempting, easy thing, I think, for any of us in a hard season. So when I start to feel that way, it's just help me see them. It's because he loves us anyway. So that lets me, I don't know what's going on with you, but like taking the breath to positively see people.
And you have a great deal of empathy for others. Where does that come from?
Oh, I think a lot of that is my faith and then my vision disability. That journey has cultivated that empathy. Really simple example, but college, everybody maybe not their best version of themselves. They're not fully an adult yet, but I used to drive and be like kind of a cranky driver behind the wheel of like, get out of my way. And why are you so slow? Just easily frustrated. Nothing aggressive, but just easily frustrated. And as my vision disability progressed, I was diagnosed in my early 20s, and now I drive like a 90-year-old, and hunched over the wheel and in the right-hand lane, super slow. Just you start to go, hey, I don't know their story. Like maybe they're driving really wacky because the kid is throwing up in the back seat and it's all they can do to like keep the car steady to get home. I don't know their story, so it just helps me take that breath. In workshops, I can't see people's faces to read their facial expressions and the nuances there really well. And so I just assume everyone's having the best time, which is like I think my trainer gift, which lets me enjoy the workshop even if there's someone cranky. But it also just lets me take that breath of like, I can't see your face, but maybe something else is going on in your life. Let's work through that, like trying to read the body language because I can't make quick assumptions based off of what I see. I have to tell a more positive story, and started to build that discipline in my own habit of thought. I call them A-B stories in my head. I think someday this will be a book iteration, but the A story is the assumption and the anxiety and the anger and the accusation of like, you're so lazy, you're so slow, you're so frustrating, you're so inconsiderate, whatever the A is. And the B story is something better. And you have to choose the B story. So even as simple as like, I was in line at Chick-fil-A for 12 whole minutes in the drive-thru, which felt like hours.
That's
And
long
the
for
A story
them.
was like, oh my God, gosh, like, what are we doing here? I think you took my order 3 times. And then after, I pull out a thought. The B story is, I just got dinner for my husband and I in 12 minutes. It's by our choice and it's affordable. And maybe it was that person's first day and they were figuring out the point of sale system, like didn't know where things were. Like, I don't know. But 12 minutes and I'm upset. The A story has to shift to the B story, but you have to see the A story and then choose to tell yourself a better story.
It's powerful. Is that a strategy you came up with
Yeah,
yourself? Or
that's
okay.
my empathy hack. Yeah.
And that is I mean, you have a lot of gifts, but that is why you're such an exceptional trainer, is because you are able to get some radically simple tips, which is one of your taglines. And
Yes,
it
it
is
is.
so true and factual, because I give very long-winded answers, or I want to over explain, and then you can just radically simplify something where you're like, that makes so much sense. We need more of this.
Thank you. I
So
don't feel like in my normal conversation I'm great at that. I can be a little bit loquacious, but when I'm intentionally trying to be sharp with my words, I can get there. The radical simple phrase is part of my brand. I love it, but it's so many things are simple, right? We see all the posts on social media that are people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses, like these taglines. But radical means you actually do something about it. So I can tell you A/B stories is a simple strategy. Notice the A story, tell yourself a better story that has empathy in it. Radical means you're doing it, because that's not happening for a lot of people. So if you're going to be radical, you're countercultural, you're unique in that action, you have to actually take action. So that's what I like about it. I have to simplify whatever concept I want to teach. You have to do the radical piece by doing something about it.
yes. And that is often the sticking point, is that we don't always want to do the thing, or we can't get everyone else on board to do the thing, which is sometimes frustrating as well.
Especially when you're leading something that's important that you believe in, like I know that you have, to just come with me. Let's just go. I see where we need to be, and you have to bring them along. It's a lot more
Yes.
work.
Yeah, it is, and I see the working genius widgets behind you, which
Yes.
leads then into that discussion of work that I love, because it's not just about personality types or your strengths. And I've talked about working genius some, but because you are a certified trainer, will you actually explain it where people can make connections of what I reference?
Yeah. And you mentioned it's not a personality assessment. They say it's 20% good for self-awareness, personality kind of vibes, and 80% about how we get work done. So the phases of a project or collaborative work among team members. So any given type of work, whether you're landscaping your backyard or like designing a new website, or redesigning your organizational structure for your department, anything like that would go through the 6 phases of a widget. And each of those has a lot of cool nuances, and they sometimes go back and forth, but they're pretty sequential. And the concept of working genius is that there's 2 of those phases, and they're not always consecutive, but 2 of those 6 that light you up, give you tons of energy, and you just naturally enjoy them. You could be great at all 6, so it is not about competency, but the 2 that, like, if you did those all day long, you would go home energized like a hot cup of coffee still. Whereas if you did some of your competency ones or your frustration ones, those phases of work, you could still be amazing at them, but you would be completely drained, out of energy, not your favorite day, kind of like a cold cup of coffee. Yeah, without spending like hours talking about working genius. It's
Yeah.
Patrick Lynchoni's model. He has a book and a podcast on it, and then there are certified facilitators all across the U.S. I happen to be one of them, and I really love getting to do that with all kinds of teams. But it's powerful when an executive team does it, because then the language can stick to filter down within the organization. It can be tricky when a team starts to use it, but other people don't know that language. So they understand, like, let's say a department knows that we're in the wonder invention third stage of work when we're doing strategic planning for the whole year, but the executive who's running that strategic planning session doesn't have this language. And so they're trying to make tactical decisions. And it's harder if you aren't speaking the same language. So I like to do it with leaders at the top first, but I've done it with just random open enrollment class workshops where you're just learning about the model, and inevitably somebody's like, oh my gosh, my family needs this.
Well,
Because it
that's the
applied
thing. Yes.
for letters,
Yes,
what your
I'm a
geniuses are.
DI, discern, right, and inventor.
Okay, so I'm curious. Inventor, discerner, combo. So that's your genius. You love to come up with ideas. And then discernment is that like great gut instincts about this is going to work or this isn't quite right. Um, when you have both of those, which the creator Patrick Lencioni does, that's his same genius, you can get stuck in this loop where you're like inventing, discerning, inventing, discerning. And then usually because you've discerned your own ideas, like you've already decided which ones are good. So then when you bring them to a group to collaborate, you're not actually saying, what do you all think? Which is what most inventors do. They're like bringing it for discernment. You're subconsciously like, I've already discerned this. Tell me that it's great because I know I'm like, this is the right one. Is that true?
Oh, yes. And it's true because I know, and this is terrible, but I feel like I can validate that because I've already done the work. Like I've read more than everyone in the room. I've done more research. I've over analyzed,
Yep.
gathered the data because I'm also in that recovering perfectionist and that I'm not bringing half work forward.
Yep. Yep.
I'm not bringing something out just to bring it out. Like I've vetted it that I have pretty strong faith in what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So yes, it is.
It's a huge strength, I think. But then if you think about yourself leading a team, if I was coaching you as an executive over your team, to be able to just use the language to say, hey, y'all, I have 5 ideas. I've intentionally not overthought them or researched them, and I want your feedback. I'm bringing this for discernment. Or to be able to say to them, y'all, I have 5 ideas. I researched them. This is the one I think is best. I've already done the discernment phase, but I'm looking for, are there any new gut instincts that you want to bring before we move this forward? So you just create space for it, but you can still call out, I think I'm on to this right idea, instead of them thinking that it's a wide open bucket for feedback. And you're like, we're ready to rock. We're ready to galvanize this project. I don't want your input yet.
Right.
Yeah, the language is the most helpful part for teams.
Love it. Well, and the discernment piece, I would say I lean even closer to that area in all of my other exploration of self, being an intuitive. And, we kind of, before we even started recording, we're talking a little bit about writing and books, and we're going to go forward on yours here in a minute. But the aspect of what I'm writing about is trusting my own intuition over other people's advice. So sometimes I hold back when it's like, you don't need to do any more research or ask for any more opinion. You just need to go. Just go forth. So,
Trust your discernment. Yeah. Yeah, that's a tricky, nuanced space to live in where you have that natural gut instinct. Like if you completely hated knowing if it was the right thing to pursue, then you might more readily go to people and be like, what feedback? What do you got? What blind spots do you see? But if you've kind of already done that for yourself, inviting that would just cause a spin of, oh, was I right? Or are you right? Or who's, especially if it's something you're creating like your book. I just had that conversation with my husband, Joe, this morning. I was like, I put this post on LinkedIn for my subtitles and people voting, and it was very helpful. I got some really good insight. And in fact, one friend like transformed the book title in a DM. But what it did for me is say, I gave 4 choices for the subtitle, and wonderful people replied. And 3 of the 4 have like equal amounts of votes. It helps me rule one out, but you're never going to please everybody. So when you're creating something like a story or a book, asking for the feedback and then trusting your gut to know this is the right way for me.
Yes, I would even say I have discernment about my discernment in that there are only a handful of people that I'm going to actually take the feedback from.
So wise. So wise.
And I know who those people are, which is why I'm like, hey, you want to get coffee? For honest feedback and constructive criticism. And that is hard for people to sometimes be open and willing to accept. And you, again, are exceptional with narrowing down, like operationally defining specifics to give the feedback, not just fluff, but also here's what you did well here. And uplifting.
I mean, everybody's got good stuff, even when there's room for improvement. With what's it called? The feedback sandwich, where you're like, this was amazing, but you should do this differently, but this was amazing, is the worst advice ever. Like, everybody feels through that and sees through that.
Yes.
But if you're sincerely saying, you're crushing it at this, I love this component, period. Have you thought about this? Or you might want to consider this. Like, they can stand separate. It's when you're doing it as a strategy to be positive before you're negative, drives me bananas. But when it's really sincere and they're separate statements, they can coexist.
Do you want to talk about your book?
I do, but first I want to ask you, what are you learning right now? Because I've been pondering this lately. Like, you're a reader and you're in this new space and season in your life, and you're writing and you're podcast recording, and I feel like this answer could go a million different directions, and I'm so curious. What's something you're learning right now?
I have had to take great learning into the appropriate use of AI. I will tell you, my number one pet peeve as I am writing is people going, well, you can just have AI write your book.
Ugh.
So if someone came on the show and said that, I'd probably just turn it off.
Episode canceled.
Yes, because, well, first of all, I don't want to read vague text that doesn't have like real life substance to it. But also, it kind of speaks to the person doesn't respect the work you're doing or understand just appalling that is to the writing world. And I don't consider myself in that world yet, but I mean, a publisher is not going to pick you up with AI, and that's in your writing. So anyway, okay, that's off topic, but I just have to get it out there because it is such one of my pet peeves right now.
Add to that, if you're feeling like you want to use AI, perhaps you don't love writing. So there could be another outlet for your creative or your training or your whatever that you're trying to do. I feel the same way when it's cringy. I intentionally did not touch any kind of generative AI through the whole book writing process, because I was like, A, I don't want to ever be compromised and have somebody call that out. But also, the doing it is the fun part. Like, this is what I want to say, and how do I craft this, and could I make this better and more clear? If you don't really enjoy that writing piece, don't write.
Yeah, there are tons of other avenues and aspects.
Yeah.
And usage for it. And so rather than being totally disillusioned and turned off with it, I have learned here are the appropriate tools and appropriate areas to use it. I will tell you, you are such you're a trainer and a facilitator and a designer. Realizing the number of days, and heck, for us, probably years we wasted designing a slide deck when there are now AI tools that will do it in 3 minutes for you is a little deflating. But as I'm moving into, okay, I've done this podcast, now I want to lead a coaching session on this, or I want to link the podcast with a blog I wrote and now do a workshop on it. AI can generate much better pictures and illustrations and take the questions I have and put them into a format that makes it very usable. So I will tell you, when I get into the areas of where we are failing in public education, turning away from using AI for many years has set education back even further, because I think some of the frustration teachers felt in differentiation and being able to have level assignments, those are tools AI could do for them. It's not creating the work for them. They have the idea. Now, how do I differentiate to 3 different instructional levels in one classroom? That's where money should have been going in education. Okay, off that soapbox.
But I do think the district we came from is progressing, which is exciting. I mean, I think they've got a new ed tech director and have got some AI policies, and so that's hopeful to find that balance. I both agree and feel hopeful.
I think it could take some relief off of teachers while still meeting students' needs, because they obviously are light years ahead of us. So teaching the students then the appropriate time and place and way to use it. So I'm learning that.
What tool do you like? I know you're not like promoting and getting paid for anything,
I'm
and you
not.
might find a new favorite one tomorrow, so you're not tied to it. But what have you found that you like for this process?
Okay, so I like Gamma
Okay.
for my presentations. And I will also tell you why they shorten them. For someone that wants to have a 40 slide, training
Yeah.
show, they get it down to about 10 to 15, which is what I need, depending on the training size. But that is very helpful as well. So for slide deck, training, creation, Gamma, for question stemming and taking podcast and generating those keywords, SEO, all of this new lingo. Education has its lingo, so does the content creation digital world. So Cap Show will give you question stems, and it almost does what you do for me at times of here's a thread that I pulled out of a 45-minute session. Here's one thread. Take this thread and go make an infographic out of it. Go make a quote from it to just pull that layer out to get
It
radically simple.
analyzes that through line that you have, whether you meant to put it there or not, and then can turn that into something magical.
Yes.
Now I have two new tools to explore. However, I need to play with Gamma. For me personally, my process, I respect exactly what you described with making the slide deck as a need. It's part of my planning. So I think if I took that out, I would be a less sharp trainer because it's where I'm saying, what's the question I want on screen? What's the transition? Like for me, it's a part of the planning process. And personally, I love a ton of slides that are wildly minimalistic compared to so like no, I shouldn't say I love a ton. The number of slides feels irrelevant to me if they are bold, minimalistic, and purposeful. So I'm gonna have to play with Gamma. Maybe I'm a little bit biased against it, and I shouldn't be, and it's gonna be my new favorite tool next time we talk. So thank you.
I'm open to feedback or other tools that are out there. What it has done for me is freed up the mind space to focus on actually writing and producing a podcast so that I'm not spending time designing a slideshow.
100% get that. Just this weekend, I hired, and I've never done this, like some designers for contract work for like interior book formatting. Um, And I had a friend tell me at lunch recently, she's like, just do it. Just like go find a template and buy the template for $10 and figure it out. And it's like, it's not an ability to figure out how to have a gutter margin that alternates each page and like use Microsoft Word instead of Google Docs. I know I could. I don't want to spend my time figuring out how to do that. I want to spend it on writing the next book. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Well,
not.
it's back
So
to the working genius kind of thing of where do I want to be going.
does that for you. It makes your slide decks amazing. So you can spend the time somewhere else. That I love.
I'll run old slide decks through it just to maybe get, because you can, obviously enter a topic or enter your content and it formulates something brand new, but it will also update old things. So something that maybe doesn't look as aesthetically appealing these days, or it had an educational flair and now it needs a leadership type flair, then it keeps your content, but it changes it up. That I love.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty great.
So I feel like I'm learning a lot, but the biggest thing has just been kind of like I said, just being okay with not constantly doing. That has been a different mindset.
You
To move out of a place where I would say I actually in some of my writing excavated this to like ninth grade, that of how power packed my schedule had to be from sunup to sundown, 7 days a week. Yes, all the way through. So, like from age 14 to age 40, go, 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 do more, more. Because as we discussed, that's the mindset is there's a better way. There's the fine line, and I want to improve and I want to grow and I want to have knowledge and I want to do a lot of things to let's be in the moment and appreciate life. That's where I am.
love that
Um,
that's where you are,
being
exploring what it means to rest and recharge and be able to say this is enough, not in a fitful way, right? Just in a this has been enough work today. Like this has been good work today, or it's my Saturday, or whatever that is for you. Like that's healthy, even though it's hard because there's always more good work to do. I think especially when you come from my sister-in-law taught me this. She's in global relief aid and economic development, and a hard industry to be in right now. And I think when you come from public ed, it's really similar. Your heart is for service. So it's not just a job that you're like, okay, it's easy to turn off at 5. And I'm guessing I'm not a mom, but if I was, like, your heart's for your kids, right? Like, it's good stuff. So to be able to say, this has been good, and it's okay, I'm going to say it's enough for today and rest, when there's more good that could happen, and not just like, it's easy to say no to stuff you don't want to do or stuff that you don't see a big impact for, but healthy and really hard to be able to say, no, this is enough for today.
Yeah, it's a bit into dealing with the perfectionism because I had to get okay with putting out podcasts that I didn't necessarily love or that had glitches because I needed some body of work as a springboard, right? I can't just stay in my bubble and I've got to venture out there and have some data points of, okay, here's what I can improve. Here's what this works, this doesn't. So I had to be okay with that. And I will say it's a work in progress because I probably have not publicized or put my work in enough places to be recognized with my writing as well. It's getting better. So I'm on Substack and there's a huge group on Substack, but I don't necessarily put my work into writing communities. Like it's a writing community, but I feel like it's a social media platform, whereas an actual group of people that are like published authors to critique my work. So being open to sharing basically first drafts of things rather than holding on to them until I've got them perfected.
Watching that journey, that growth for you though, and that's been really neat. Even just in this new season, you aren't letting perfect impede progress. Like you're producing the podcast, you're in writing groups, and you're doing it. And my little starter book that I'm working on, it's so fascinating. I think maybe every creative work you never feel finished. I don't know. I'm like, but there's a new strategy, or I could have ordered this earlier. Oh my gosh, I forgot this. Like there's just constantly refinement that you could do. So even with art, our ability to say no and our ability to say, what do you think? Yeah, those are important and tricky. But I feel like I'm watching you not let perfection get in the way of progress.
Thank you.
It's inspiring.
It's a whole new outlook. It's something actually I'm kind of taking a bit of pride in that years ago, if I'd have had a bad experience with a podcast, I would have just stopped. I would have
Mm-hmm.
never, I would not have kept going. Instead now, and I would have done something destructive instead. And so maybe now I eat a muffin or something. I eat something bad for one night and I turn it off. But 2 days later, I'm right back at it instead of abandoning the thing that I think I want to do or that is bringing me some joy and purpose.
That's big learning. That's like deep soul learning.
Yes, that is where I consider myself to be right now. It's kind of scary.
Also important is you're coaching leaders and people through career transitions and all these contexts that you thrive in supporting other people. I feel like it's important that you are walking through that difficult thing, right? That you don't just profess that good enough sometimes needs to be, or rest is important, but you're learning how to do it yourself and you're able to say, this is why it gets hard and this is how it's real. And yeah, that continual improvement for yourself is a big part of what makes you attractive as a coach, I think.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Midlife Catalyst Podcast. Be sure to come back next week to hear part 2 of my conversation with Tami Shaw. We will pick up talking about her forthcoming book, her writing process, and everything that entails. You can find more about Tami at positive strategy, be sure to visit the show notes for links to her page and more information about the books and topics that we discussed. As you can see, one of the reasons I hold Tami so close to me is her ability to not only clarify and simplify concepts, but her questioning techniques. I love how she asks better questions to get vulnerable conversation and topics flowing. I think it's so critical to go below the surface and dig in and explore what people are really thinking and feeling. That's how you excavate growth and change, getting into those things that not everyone has the opportunity, the courage, or the bravery to talk about. Find your people that promote those conversations and dig into them. If you enjoyed this podcast or any of the Midlife Catalyst podcast episodes, please go to whatever platform where you watch or listen, leave a like, a comment, or a review, and be sure to share your favorite episode with a friend. This helps me greatly continuing to grow this community. Thank you for joining the Midlife Catalyst podcast, a place where ordinary people share extraordinary stories. And remember, AI can do a lot, but it cannot write your story. Be the author of your own narrative.